We're all used to the slick TV advertising. But how much do we know about the people who put the food on our plates?
Nous ne sommes pas des esclaves, nous sommes des êtres humains.
The supermarkets say they support workers' rights, but on the ground, we heard a different story. Anger, exploitation, sickness, harassment. All to satisfy our insatiable demand for year-round fresh produce. I took a trip to Murcia. We're in southern Spain, a region well known to British tourists, but also a magnet for economic migrants from Africa and Asia, migrants who are vulnerable to exploitation. At this time of year, it's also the place where British supermarkets, Tesco, Marks & Spencer, Waitrose, Sainsbury's and Asda source much of our fresh salads. They love to talk up their green credentials and tell consumers they've signed up to global rules that ensure their food is produced ethically and workers are treated fairly. No excessive hours or forced overtime, fair pay, safe working conditions. Yet workers claim they're exposed to pesticides and mistreated by the employment agencies that hire them.
La gente le chopan el sangre. Trabajas 2 meses o 4 meses y al fin te echan al calle, sin finiquito, sin pago, sin nada, sin días jornadas. 26 días nos ponen 16 o 18. Siempre roban 8 días, 7, 6 y eso no es normal.
The ethical trading rules state that wages should meet basic needs, should be transparent, and no deductions should be permitted without worker consent. Rules our supermarkets all support. But workers told us these rules are frequently broken. Rather than being paid by the hour as stated in their contract, they claim the employment agency often pays them by the number of boxes they fill instead, which they say forces them to work longer hours for less money. Another lettuce picker agreed to speak to me anonymously. He showed me a log of the hours he said he worked, and then what he recorded he was actually paid, substantially less. Have you taken this data and used it to complain?
كيقول لك هذا هو الحساب كيقول لك خلي لي الورقه 3 ايام 4 ايام نهضر معك في التليفون خاصني 24 ساعه كيقول لي هذاك هو الثمن اللي جبت بغيت تخدم خدم ما بغيتش روح تروح.
Under the ethical rules, workers should be free to voice their grievances without discrimination. Tesco's goes even further, pledging its team of ethical trade managers will investigate any complaints on the ground. And on the ground, they are complaining. Demonstrations have rocked the region. Workers here blamed the employment agencies they have to sign up to for work.
La nómina si trabajo un mes que se ponga un mes, no por 5 días que están robando. ¿Sabe? El derecho de la mano.
There are more than 40 agencies in the region, and unions say they receive complaints about them every day.
Casi el 90 o 80% de las empresas STT yo creo que no valen, porque lo que están haciendo es explotar a la gente y ganar un dinero. Aquí que yo sepa, y según la gente que nos viene y nos comenta esos problemas, no hay ninguna ETT en salvo. Todas tienen problemas. Todas causan problemas a los trabajadores.
The pickers in our investigation were mainly employed through an agency called Integra Empleo, and we discovered one of its biggest contracts is with a large Spanish salad producer called Agra Herney, which in turn supplies 5 of our biggest British supermarkets. Most workers we met here were too scared to talk on camera, even anonymously. But off camera they told us they were compelled to work overtime, but often not paid for it, or if they refused, they were sometimes blacklisted. The code states all overtime should be voluntary and paid at a premium rate, and Marks & Spencer also stipulates that no work should come with a threat of penalty or sanction. Everyone we spoke to today told the same story, whether it was being forced to work overtime for no extra pay, or too scared to call in sick, or too frightened to complain. And the sense of desperation, nothing will ever change, and that there's nobody here to help them. Despite their ethical commitments, the supermarkets told us they weren't aware of these practices and are investigating. Agroherney said it upheld the highest standards and would investigate the allegations. It accused the employment agency of a communication failure. This entire region is dependent on exporting salads and vegetables, but the global financial crisis means costs have been squeezed and, it's alleged, corners cut. Early the next morning, we saw firsthand just what this means for the migrant population here, desperate for work. On street corners, groups of men huddled together, hoping to be picked up and taken to the fields. It's an activity which is illegal under Spanish labour laws, yet everyone, including the police, seems to tolerate it.
It's 6 a.m. in the heart of Murcia, and we've come here to a roundabout where we've been told that migrant workers congregate first thing every morning to be picked up, ferried out to the fields. Now that's an illegal activity. They pick lettuce and other vegetables which are very likely to end up in our supermarkets and on our plates at home in Britain.
We don't know where those particular workers were headed that morning. But everywhere you look in Murcia, the fields are littered with migrant workers picking from dawn to dusk. You also see lots of these, large machines spraying pesticides on the crops. Legally, workers shouldn't be in close proximity, but it's common to see them in the same fields as sprayers. And that's led to another serious allegation that workers are breathing in poisonous vapours and falling sick. I met one worker whose identity we have protected, who claims she fell ill when working for Agroherney in fields where pesticides were being sprayed. That was 2 years ago, but even after multiple operations on her sinuses, she's in constant pain and unable to work.
ولاني ما كيحترموش الخدامه ما كيحترموش الخدام راه خدام ويقولوا الخدام راه خدام حنا كنديروا الرهش ما على بالهمش ما خصهم الخدمه تخدم وتسيقي والفورميكان راه التراكتور كيصوت في الفورميكان والكوادريه راهم خدامين وواخا يزكي وكيقول لهم خدم راهم الشركه راه دير الدواء للسلطه.
How do you feel? Can you explain to us how much pain you're in?
كنحس بواحد النقص كبير في التنفس وكنحس عندي لايري داك لايري البرد عندي لداخل وهذاك البرد هو داك الفورميكان بقى كيدور لي في التنفس مؤثر لي على الجهه اليمنيه كنحس براسي والو.
But this does not appear to be an isolated case. 2 days later, we found out that one of the Agroherney workers we spoke to had been rushed to hospital after breathing in dangerous fumes. He was signed off by a doctor with bronchitis caused by inhalation of pesticides. The next day, the employment agency Empleo fired him. Some politicians in Murcia call the treatment of workers modern slavery.
Supermercados, las grandes superficies, las grandes empresas de la alimentación, que son las que contratan a estas empresas agrícolas para obtener los productos, son las responsables de esa situación de explotación, porque además consiguen comprar el producto agrícola muy barato y luego venderlo al consumidor, y todo eso se hace sobre las espaldas de los trabajadores del campo y sobre el sudor y la explotación en condiciones de semiesclavitud.
Empleo denies all the allegations and told Channel 4 News that it complies with the law. It said that our interviewees were not representative of its business as a whole. We asked Integra for an interview, but it declined. Agroherney strongly denies any claim that it mistreats or exploits agency workers and said fair treatment and safety of workers was paramount. It added it had strict procedures to protect workers from pesticides and had never received reports of any exposure. As a result of our investigation, Agroherney told us it has ceased working with Empleo and was making arrangements to employ all the agency workers directly.